On behalf of Dr. George Rapier, who is the founder of WellMed and the board chair for the WellMed Charitable Foundation, it's a real pleasure to sponsor this conference and to welcome you to San Antonio. It's nice to be among colleagues and friends, and certainly the Aging in Texas Conference. We deeply believe in the work we do. We know the good that you do in each community. The WellMed Charitable Foundation was founded really to be the philanthropic nonprofit partner for WellMed Medical Management. WellMed is a series of clinics. We're the healthcare side, and we have clinics in El Paso and Austin, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, Dallas, and the Lower Rio Grande Valley. And the foundation works in all of those areas, and so we're your partners for caregiver services, for senior centers, for falls prevention, for meals, a wide variety of services. And so thank you for partnering with us. We're happy to partner with you, and we're happy to be here at the Aging in Texas Conference. I wanted to talk just a little bit about aging and share some thoughts after, Jim and I were talking last night about how long, we've been in this business, all of the work that we've done over the years, and kind of reflect about where we are and where we're going. We're going to talk about Back to the Future of Aging. And Back to the Future was inspired to me by my 19-year-old son, who just a couple of weeks ago asked me if we could have a Back to the Future marathon and watch the original movies from the 1980s. And some of you in the room have probably remembered the movies with Michael J. Fox. And I think he was talking about them because we finally invented hoverboards. They don't really hover, but they look like the hoverboards in the movie. And they were all the rage at this past Christmas. And a lot of the teenage guys have these hoverboards. So I think that's where it came from. But as I was watching the movie, I realized that's exactly where we are. We are back to the future. When I started in the late 80s, that was when Ken Dykewald had just coined the phrase age wave. And so since then, all we've heard is silver tsunami, 74 million baby boomers coming. We've got a plan. We've got to prepare. Well, guess what? The future's now. This is it. The 10,000 baby boomers a day aging in. It's right now. It's happened. So what happens is, let's look back to all of that planning. Did we get it right? So let's talk about what we got right, what we might need to rethink, and what we might need to seriously think about as we go back to our future. So what we got right. Well, we've been talking about the income and lack of savings among especially the boomer population. We've been talking about changes in retirement and jobs, and we've been talking about health, and I think that we were pretty much on track. So, lack of income and savings. Originally, when we started talking about this, we were saying that the lack of savings, that about 2/3 of boomers didn't have any savings, and it was going to make the Great Depression look like a cakewalk. Well, what happened? In between that discussion and now, we had a great recession where many people lost their jobs, many people went through their savings, and so what was already a precarious proposition is actually worse now than it originally was. So looking at the report from the Insured Retirement Institute this year, only 55% of baby boomers have any independent retirement savings outside of Social Security. And among those, only half have at least $100,000. Most of them are $100,000 or less, and maybe $100,000 sounds like a lot of money. But if you average that out over 20 years, that's $7,000 a year to live on. How many people in this room think that they can live on $7,000 a year? It's really not very much. So unfortunately, we were right about this, and income and lack of retirement savings may well be the defining issue in the era to come. But what it may change is it may change policy, it may change eligibility, and it may change the political will in this country to do things about some of the services we provide because the demand is so great. Retirement and jobs. Retirement's not going to look like it has for the last 30 years, right? We all remember our parents who worked for one company, set aside all this money, retired. Some of them got to play golf. Some of them moved into a retirement community. Some of them hung out and watched TV. But, you know, it was very well defined. Go to school, go to work, retire. That's not what the future is going to look like. We already know that many seniors don't want to retire. They want to continue working. Some want to continue working full-time. Some have to continue working, at least part-time. But it's really unrealistic for us to think that everyone's going to want to retire, or that everyone's going to want to work for free or volunteer. We're going to have something in between. And so I've been thinking about the generation coming up. I mentioned my 19-year-old son, and I've got 2 other older sons. And I've noticed that there's kind of a shift. They don't really want to work the 80 hours a week some of us have been working for the last umpteen years. You know, they don't want to work all of that hard. And so we've got seniors who need to come in and out of the workforce, and maybe we have a younger workforce that isn't going to work full-time, and maybe they want to go in and out of the workforce. So what does episodic work look like? You know, maybe it's not just work for the boomers and the retirement that's changing. Maybe it's going to change the way everyone works at every age. So this could be a very, very different time that we're looking at. Health. Health is one of the reasons I left the AAA world and came to work for the WellMed Charitable Foundation. Back in 2002, I was trying to figure out why I spent so much money on transportation. Anybody in this room spend any money on transportation, or did you just give up? And what I found out is that 90% of my transportation dollars were going for dialysis transportation, and the other 10% were going for chemo. So 100% of the transportation dollars were going to pay for health care. And I thought, I've got to do something different. How do we get to root cause? If health conditions are driving the need for the services, how do we address the health conditions? And so that's where I made the change. If you look at these stats that recently came out from the United Health Foundation, it says the next generation of senior citizens will be sicklier and costlier than to the healthcare system over the next 14 years than the previous generation. If we drill down into Texas, the stats actually get worse. So our senior population is going to increase 66% compared to 49.5% nationally. So we're going to have more seniors. Obesity in the last 15 years in Texas has increased 41% versus 25% nationally, and we currently sit at number 41 in health in the nation. So there are 9 states worse than us. Thank God for Alabama and Louisiana, because they're, you know, somewhere below us, and Louisiana is dead last. So, you know, we're in our normal position here, and the health status in our state has actually gotten worse, 13% worse in the last 15 years compared to 9% nationally. So boomers may have disability at younger ages than the current population of seniors. And for those of us who are working with seniors in need, the thought that the demand for our services may start even earlier is kind of a scary thought. What's on the flip side, the comforting thought, is something that we actually learned from Nancy Whitelaw and Jim Furman at the National Council on the Aging back with the evidence-based programs, is it's never too late to change health. It's never too late to start exercising. It's never too late to do something differently. And what I've learned in healthcare is that behavior change happens in the community. It's not going to happen in a clinic. It's not going to happen during a medical appointment. If we want to change health, it is in our domain in this room. It is in community. And behavior change is something we can become involved with in a daily basis to really make an impact on health. And we're going to have to do that because on the healthcare side, the bad news is we don't have enough physicians. We already don't have enough physicians. We don't have enough physicians in primary care. We don't have enough physicians trained in geriatrics. And it takes about 10 years to grow a physician. My oldest son is finishing his 3rd year of residency. I begged him to go into geriatrics, absolutely begged him. Didn't work. So another one bites the dust. We have to do something about the reimbursement. We have to do something about driving people into healthcare, geriatrics, primary care, because that's where the need goes. So that's kind of where we already knew a lot of that. But what do we need to rethink? going to talk a little bit about the Older Americans Act and about comprehensive long-term care policy. So, the Older Americans Act. Leo Buscaglia, some of you may remember in the 1970s, he was the guy that said we need to go around hugging everybody. And he said the words, "and they lived happily ever after," were the most tragic words ever written in literature. And why did he say that? Because it was a fairy tale. And when people didn't live happily ever after, they felt cheated. There must be something wrong with my life. I'm not happy. And it was a letdown. It wasn't reality. So what do we say every day in our service programs? We're going to help people live as independent as possible for as long as possible. That sounds pretty good, but let's think about it a little bit more closely. Does independence drive people into isolation and loneliness in their older age? This is an issue that's really come of age recently. There was a huge study, 35 years of data, 3 million people, and what they found is that loneliness, isolation, and living on your own can increase your risk of premature death by 26, 29, and 32% respectively. That the effect of loneliness on longevity is nearly as strong as living in poverty. And most of us know that poverty and lack of education are the key indicators of poor health. So as a risk factor for heart disease and clogged arteries and stroke, loneliness is the new smoking. Loneliness is the new obesity. And this is a reality. My own father, when I think the last of his coffee friends passed away, he's 85, he looked at me and he said, "I didn't know I was going to be the last man standing." And when we put my mother in assisted living this year, I can tell you that loneliness and isolation are the single biggest concerns that we have in our family, besides some of the care in the facility. So now loneliness and isolation, it doesn't even have to be real isolation, it's perceived loneliness. So if you think you're lonely, if you feel that you're lonely, it's gonna have the same effect. It can increase your risk of a coronary event by 50%. So this is huge, and all of our internet interactions aren't really helping. There was a study on Facebook that shows that there's an inverse effect. The more time people spend on Facebook, the less happy they actually are. So, yeah, big surprise. So get off Facebook for just a second. All right, so here's the caveat in all that research. What we don't know is that is it the poor health or the loneliness? Which comes first? Because people that are isolated and living alone don't take care of their health. We know that from our caregiver work, right? So is it because we become lonely, we neglect our health, or our health isn't good, we become isolated and cut off? So cause and effect are still unknown, but the idea that we need to think about driving people to be independent in their own homes, in community, as opposed to in community, in connection, with supports, with other people. What does that look like? And how do we kind of change our thinking to make sure that we're not part of that cause? Let me talk about the Older Americans Act. I have a deep love for the Act after being a AAA director for so long, and I'm so proud of what we've accomplished over the last 50 years. But we've got some problems that, those people in this room know about. One of them is the rigid funding. So we've got A, B, C, D, spend your money here, 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 and here, and it's very inflexible. Where are we going in the future? What are boomers going to demand? What are we going to demand? We're going to demand, consumer-driven care. We want what we want, when we want it, how we want it. And being told that there's only this much money in A and this much in B and this much in C isn't going to work for us because it doesn't lead to letting consumers have choices, and it doesn't lead necessarily to higher quality or better customer service. So this inflexibility of the funding definitely has to be addressed. Our targeting has to be addressed. If we think about it in Texas, our interstate funding formula says that the money's going to go for the low-income people. And so our funding goes to the areas that have the highest Medicaid. But the people with Medicaid have something. They have Medicaid. What about the people that are the low middle income? The middle income in this country are a dying breed. And we used to traditionally serve them. If we don't, then who is? And how are they going to afford care? So what can we do to support those who don't have enough money to pay on their own and don't qualify for any other services. Is that our sweet spot? It used to traditionally be that way, but can we continue to do that? I hope that we can plan for that. And then the last piece that I want to talk about with the Older Americans Act is the drive for partnerships with healthcare. And this is something that we've looked at very closely in our work, and I'm a little bit nervous because what I've seen is that some of us feel compelled and so desperate to work with healthcare that we're willing to throw in Older Americans Act dollars, which are very limited, and kind of subsidize the healthcare system. Under no circumstances should that happen. One of the latest grants that came out, we've been waiting, we want healthcare to work with the Aging Network. And there was a big grant that came out recently, and it said they had to include community services. Community services had to be a partner. But did you know in those grant funds, not a single dollar could go to expand community services. All of it had to go to healthcare. So how do we feel about that? Do we want healthcare to drive more people into our services that we don't have enough of, that doesn't expand with any of this money? And so we need serious dialogue between the healthcare side and the community side. The light bulb is going out. There are things that happen in community, like behavior change. There are things that we do that healthcare wants. But we need to have common goals and a policy that supports both and a funding system that supports both. And the Older Americans Act is not it. So comprehensive long-term care. It doesn't exist in this country. It's 100% private pay or 100% public pay, and neither is sustainable. So I have 5 members of my family as of this year living in long-term care facilities. The cost to our family is $32,900 a month. That's $394,800 a year for my great aunt, 2 aunts, an uncle, and my mother. So all of our families combined, for these relatives, we can't afford $394,000 a year to care for 5 people. I mean, how many people in the room, how many of your families can do that? This is not a workable system. And I'm not sure that we've come that much further from warehousing older people. After spending time in all of these facilities, they're prettier, they're lovely, very lovely, and they have cafeterias and bells and whistles, but try to get somebody to actually help your loved one in a long-term care facility. I want to paint a broad brush because there are some great facilities, but we have a lot of work to do around long-term care, and a lot of it is related to training and pay because our direct care force, those people that are working in those facilities, are not paid well, and the people that are working in the community are not paid well. I encourage you to go to the website for Caring Across Generations. They are actively looking at what they call our care force and issues related to direct care and caregiving. Because what we're asking our direct care force to do is to work for barely above minimum wage. For $16,000 a year, we're asking them to care for the people we care about the most, our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents and our spouses, and they make a little bit of money, and oh, by the way, take care of your family too, and oh, by the way, work some overtime. This is not a system that we are honoring the work of caregiving, or we are honoring the people that need the care because we haven't put enough value on it. And if we're a little concerned about that, let's be concerned about family caregivers as well. The average woman who quits her job to take care of a relative will lose $303,000 of income and benefits over the course of her lifetime. How many of us want to put $303,000 on the table and walk away from it? Because that's what we're doing. So caregiving is a huge issue. Long-term care is a huge issue. And we need to start working on it now. If we think about the Elder Justice Act, it took us 10 years to pass it, and we really have to do better than that when it comes to long-term care. All right, so what do we need to think about a little bit harder that maybe we haven't thought about so far? We're going to talk about technology, how it's changing our lives and society, how it could change delivery of programs and services, and how we as aging providers can leverage emerging technologies. And we're going to talk a little bit about quality and customer service. You know, if you go to any event, except for right now because you all are eating lunch, you're not on your phones. But go to a concert. I've been playing this game lately. Go to any event and look at how many people are on their phones leading up to the event. I was driving yesterday. I don't know if everyone's playing Pokemon Go, but everybody on the sidewalk was looking at their smartphone. So if looking at your phone is the cultural norm, if this is what we're going to do, and I can tell you the people in the facilities I was talking about earlier, they're looking at their smartphones, they're not looking at the residents. If that's the social norm, then how do we engage each other in conversation? How do we connect with our consumers and other people that we need to serve? So technology, let me give you a story about aging providers and technology, and I'm going to tell on myself. So I hired an intern, a young man, because they have to be young if they're going to be hired for technology. And he went back and he told his college professor what it was like to work for us, because we hired him from the university. Well, his college professor happens to be one of my best friends. And this is what she told me he said. He went back and he said, those people are so easy to impress. If you post something on social media, they think you're a genius. So how many of us are patting ourselves on the back because we have a website? We're online and we post on Facebook. Young people can't get off Facebook fast enough because we're taking it over. This is technology from 5 and 10 years ago. We're trying to catch up to something that train already left the station. You know, maybe it's because we're working with seniors and they haven't adopted the technology, but you know, we need to kind of move a little bit further ahead on the train and think about emerging technology and how we might use it, or we're really going to be left behind. At a meeting with the National Council on the Aging, they also had a young person give a presentation on technology and social media. And she was saying what everyone is looking for is content that is fresh. That means updating it more than every 2 years. It needs to be interactive. I know on our website we're great at lots of words, but if you want to do something on it, not so strong. And it needs to be authentic. So it needs to be language, activities, dialogue, interaction that speaks to the person who's looking for that information. We've got a long way to go on the technology road, but we need to think about it because we can make a real difference if we look at where we're going. With smartphone technology, we have the ability to provide information, goods, services, and connect with people. You know, that phone that we carry around all the time that we're looking at, we need to think about that technology as our connection and how it's going to redefine the future, how it can create dynamic interaction, and how our seniors and our caregivers who thought they were alone, maybe they're not as isolated as we thought they were because we can reach them not just with digital, but with voices and services and really connect with them through their technology. The last thing I'll talk about is customer service, quality, and efficiency. Do you think about these issues every day in your agency? How many times do you think, how well am I doing? I wonder how well I'm doing. I wonder how happy the people I'm serving are. Because that's one of the things that I really encourage us to start thinking about very seriously. Think about how emergency rooms are changing. I mean, there's the emergency room you go and you sit 3, 6, 9 hours. But I've also seen a billboard that says the wait time at the local emergency room is 30 minutes. The wait time is 2 hours. So what they're doing is they're setting up an expectation of what's going to happen when you get to that emergency room. So they're thinking about how unhappy we are with the way the emergency rooms have been run in the past. In our caregiver program, one of our clients called an ADRC to remain unnamed, and they were told we don't return phone calls for 7 days. We were working on a Meals on Wheels program. In that particular community, they didn't have private pay Meals on Wheels. You either have to qualify or you don't get a meal. So it's that kind of service. We really have to look at, are we being consumer friendly? What can we do to get our services that way? And we can't use government funding as an excuse. What do we need to give up to be able to do what we're doing better and make a difference at those services? So when we identify something that's wrong, how quickly can we react to it? Let's think about that. All right, so the good news is, if you've seen all 3 of the Back to the Future movies, is the future is not written. We know that 74 million baby boomers are coming, but that doesn't mean that we're going to fall in all of the holes that everybody has been predicting. The doom and gloom scenario that people talk about is only valid if nothing changes, and that's not going to happen. People are not just going to retire, sit back, and demand services. We know the secret that the aging population has the potential to be an increase in time, talent, and resources brought to bear on societal issues on a grand scale, and that there are many, many positive changes that are going to happen because the boomers have changed everything they have ever touched as they have moved and aged. If you were to take a picture of my grandmother at my age, or let's think of your grandmother at your age, and hold it next to a picture of you, do you look like your grandparents at the same age? We are very different. We're going down swinging, folks. It's not going to be the same. So, you know, Jim is the king of optimism, and I'm going to let him talk to you a little bit more about the future. So I'll just leave you with this thought from Yogi Berra. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So let's change our trajectory now. Let's look at our glide path. Where are we headed? Let's fix it, and let's land where we want to land in the future that we want to have. Thank you.